You've been taught to believe healing only comes in bottles with labels, warnings, and long names you can't pronounce. That without permission from a system, your body is helpless. That if something is simple, natural, or old, it must be weak. That lie has been repeated so often it feels like truth. And because of it, you've learned to doubt your own body more than you doubt the industries profiting from your fear. Look at yourself honestly. You don't feel the way you used to. Your energy fades faster. Your body aches for no clear reason. Small problems linger longer than they should. And instead of asking why, you've learned to normalize it. You tell yourself it's age, stress, genetics, bad luck. Weaken in a moment. These things decline while you're distracted, stressed, and convinced that tomorrow will somehow be different without you changing anything today. You've been told that pain is the enemy, that discomfort means something is wrong and must be silenced immediately. But pain is information. It's the body tapping you on the shoulder before it has to shove you. When you numb it without listening, you lose the message but keep the problem. And that's how minor issues turn into lifelong burdens. Another shocking realization most people avoid: convenience has made you careless. You sit longer than your body was designed for. You move less. You breathe shallow. You eat rushed. You sleep distracted. Then you're surprised when stiffness, weakness, and fatigue show up uninvited. This isn't bad luck. It's cause and effect. Old healing practices were built around one core principle you've forgotten: support the body's natural processes instead of interrupting them. Warmth to increase flow. Movement to restore circulation. Natural compounds to nourish tissue instead of shocking it. These ideas weren't mystical, they were practical. They work because they align with how the body actually functions. Here's where the mindset shift becomes unavoidable. Healing isn't about overpowering symptoms. It's about removing what blocks recovery. Poor circulation blocks repair. Chronic tension blocks flow. Constant inflammation blocks renewal. And when those blocks are reduced, the body does what it's always known how to do. Most people never experience this because they quit too early. They try something briefly, half-heartedly, while secretly expecting it to fail. Then when results don't appear instantly, they say, it doesn't work, and return to the same habits that created the problem in the first place. That isn't experimentation. That's self-sabotage disguised as skepticism. Here's the brutal coach-style truth: consistency feels boring to people addicted to crisis. You've been trained to only respond when things get bad, but real change happens in the quiet repetitions no one praises. The small actions you repeat when nothing dramatic is happening. That's where restoration actually begins. Another uncomfortable realization: your body responds faster than your belief system allows. But doubt shuts the door before progress can enter. When you approach care with suspicion, impatience, or laziness, you reinforce the very imbalance you claim to want gone. The body mirrors the respect you give it. This isn't about nostalgia for the past. It's about reclaiming responsibility, about stopping the habit of treating your body like a machine that should perform without maintenance. You wouldn't run an engine without oil and act surprised when it breaks, yet you expect your body to thrive while ignoring its basic needs. You don't need more information. You need more integrity with what you already know. Fewer excuses, less waiting, less dependence on shortcuts. Because every time you delay caring for your body, you make recovery harder than it needed to be. You've been taught to think healing is complicated, that if you can't explain with technical language, it must be fake, that if something doesn't overwhelm you with details, it can't possibly work. This mindset hasn't made you smarter. It's made you hesitant, passive, and disconnected from your own experience. Here's a sharp truth you need to hear: your body doesn't respond to theories, it responds to conditions. Warmth or cold, flow or stagnation, tension or relaxation, nourishment or neglect. The body doesn't argue, it adapts. And it adapts to whatever environment you create for it, whether that environment supports healing or silently destroys it. Most people wait for proof before they commit. They say they'll believe once they see results. But that's backward. The body responds to consistent input, not intellectual approval. When you hesitate, dabble, or constantly SW, it approaches. You never create the conditions long enough for change to occur. Then you say nothing works, when the real issue is that you never stayed long enough to let anything work. Another harsh realization: you've been trained to mistrust your own senses. If something feels soothing, warming, calming, you're told it's just temporary. If something is harsh, aggressive, or uncomfortable, you're told it's strong. That thinking is upside down. The body heals best in states of safety, not stress. Relaxation isn't weakness. It's a biological signal that allows repair to begin. Old remedies focused on this truth without overthinking it. They aim to improve circulation, reduce stagnation, calm the nerves, and support natural elimination. These aren't vague ideas, they're fundamental processes. When circulation improves, tissues receive oxygen. When tension releases, nerves communicate clearly. When inflammation lowers, the body can redirect energy toward healing instead of defense. Here's what most people miss. When you combine supportive elements, their effect compounds. One alone may feel subtle. Together, repeated over time, they shift the internal environment. That's how small inputs create large outcomes. Not through force, but through alignment. The modern habit of demanding instant transformation has damaged your patience and your perception. You expect years of imbalance to disappear in days. When it doesn't, you conclude the method failed instead of admitting your expectations were unrealistic. That impatience keeps you stuck in a loop of starting and stopping, never allowing momentum to build. Here's the mindset shift that changes everything. Stop measuring progress by drama. Start measuring it by stability, better sleep, less stiffness, calmer nerves, quieter pain. These aren't insignificant signs. They're evidence that the body is responding. But because they aren't loud, you overlook them. Another uncomfortable truth, healing often feels boring before it feels powerful. There's no adrenaline in consistency, no excitement in routine. But boredom is often the sign that the body is finally out of crisis mode. That's when real repair happens behind the scenes without applause. You don't need to become an expert. You need to become observant. Pay attention to what makes your body feel warmer, looser, calmer, more alive. Those signals matter more than opinions. The body speaks constantly, but only to those willing to listen without bias. You underestimate how deeply neglect compounds. Not in dramatic ways you can point to, but in quiet erosion. A little less flexibility each month. A little more stiffness each morning. A little more fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. You notice it, then you brush it off, telling yourself it's normal. That word, normal, has become your excuse for decline. Here's a hard truth that hits when you're honest with yourself. Most people don't lose their health suddenly. They trade it away slowly. They trade it for convenience, for distraction, for the comfort of not changing. And the trade feels fair at first. Until one day it doesn't. Your body isn't designed to be ignored. It's designed to respond. When circulation slows, tissues starve. When nerves stay irritated, systems misfire. When inflammation becomes constant, the body stays in defense mode instead of repair mode. None of this happens by accident. It's the result of repeated neglect disguised as busy living. Another uncomfortable realization, you've been taught to wait for symptoms before you act, as if the absence of pain means everything is fine. But symptoms are the last stage, not the first. By the time pain demands attention, imbalance has already settled in. Waiting for discomfort is like waiting for smoke before worrying about fire. Old approaches understood this clearly. They focused on maintaining flow, warmth, and mobility before breakdown occurred. Not because they feared illness, but because they respected Preve. That mindset didn't rely on panic. It relied on discipline. Here's where most people resist. Prevention requires humility. It forces you to admit you're not invincible, that your body needs regular support, not occasional rescue. And the ego hates that. The ego wants to believe it can push endlessly without consequence. Another harsh truth, comfort is not the same as healing. Comfort often means staying exactly where you are. Healing demands change, even when that change feels small, repetitive, or unexciting. Especially then, you've been trained to associate effort only with struggle. But some of the most powerful changes happen through gentle, repeated support, encouraging circulation, calming overworked nerves, softening tissues that have been tight for years. These aren't dramatic acts, but they're deeply corrective. Here's the mindset shift that stops the decline. Stop treating your body like an emergency room and start treating it like a system that needs daily maintenance. You don't wait for your car engine to seize before adding oil. You don't wait for a roof to collapse before fixing leaks. Yet you treat your body with less foresight than machinery. Most people ignore this until it's too uncomfortable to continue pretending. By then, recovery takes longer, costs more, and demands more patience. Not because healing failed, but because neglect was allowed to run unchecked. You think strength comes from pushing harder, enduring more, ignoring signals. That mindset may have gotten you through tough seasons, but it's also the reason your body feels worn down instead of resilient. Endurance without restoration isn't strength. It's slow damage disguised as discipline. Here's a truth most people refuse to accept. The body doesn't heal under constant pressure. It heals when pressure is released, when circulation improves, when tissues soften instead of staying clenched, when the nervous system finally stops bracing for impact. If your body never feels safe, it never fully repairs. You've been praised for powering through discomfort, for not complaining, for staying productive no matter how you feel. But that praise came at a cost. Suppressed tension doesn't disappear. It stores itself in muscles, joints, and connective tissue. Over time, that storage becomes stiffness, pain, and reduced movement that no amount of willpower can override. Another harsh realization, chronic tightness isn't strength, it's dysfunction. Muscles that can't relax can't contract efficiently. Joints that lack lubrication wear down faster. Circulation that stays restricted starves tissues of oxygen and nutrients. None of this is dramatic at first. That's why it's so dangerous. Old healing practices understood something modern habits ignore. Softness is not weakness. Warmth, gentle stimulation, and natural compounds were used to encourage flow, not force change. The goal wasn't to dominate the body, but to cooperate with it. And cooperation produces results that aggression never will. Here's the mindset shift that challenges your pride. Rest is not quitting. Recovery is not laziness. Supporting the body is not surrender. These ideas threaten an identity built on toughness, but they're essential for longevity. Without them, strength becomes brittle, and brittle things break. Another truth that cuts deep: you can't outwork poor circulation and chronic inflammation. You can train harder, push longer, and ignore pain signals, but the bill always arrives. And when it does, it doesn't care how disciplined you used to be. Most people wait until movement becomes difficult before they pay attention, until bending, walking, or sleeping comfortably feels like a struggle. By then, they're not maintaining health, they're negotiating with decline. And that negotiation is exhausting. The body responds powerfully to signals of safety. When warmth increases, tissues relax. When nerves calm, blood flow improves. When circulation returns, healing accelerates. These aren't theories, they're biological facts. But they only work if you allow them time and consistency. You don't need to prove how tough you are anymore. That chapter is over. The next level is sustainability, supporting your body so it can support you year after year without constant breakdowns. You've been chasing intensity instead of intelligence. You assume that if something doesn't feel strong, it isn't doing anything. That belief has kept you trapped in cycles of overreaction and disappointment. Real change doesn't announce itself loudly. It builds quietly, layer by layer, while you're busy looking for fireworks. Here's a truth that disrupts your expectations. The body heals through rhythm, not shock. It responds to what you repeat, not what you try once in desperation. When you constantly switch approaches, double doses, or abandon methods too early, you create confusion instead of progress. The body thrives on consistency, not chaos. Another uncomfortable realization: most people confuse stimulation with healing. They chase sensations, burning, tingling, pressure, thinking those feelings mean something productive is happening. But sensation isn't the same as restoration. Sometimes the most effective support feels calm, warm, almost uneventful, and because it doesn't impress you, you underestimate it. Old wisdom understood the power of routine, not exciting routines, grounded ones, daily practices that supported circulation, mobility, and nerve health without overwhelming the system. You feel and start asking what you're willing to do consistently. Feelings change daily. Discipline doesn't. When care becomes non-negotiable, progress becomes inevitable. Another truth most people avoid: neglect. Feels easier than care until it doesn't. Skipping small acts of support saves you minutes now but costs you years later. The bill is delayed, but it always arrives with interest. You've been told to listen to your body, but you've confused that with obeying every urge. Listening means responding wisely, not indulging laziness. It means recognizing when discomfort is a warning, not a challenge to be ignored. Most people don't fail because they lack options. They fail because they refuse to commit to one long enough to matter. They jump from idea to idea, hoping something will magically stick without effort. Nothing works that way. You don't need a dramatic overhaul. You need a decision, a line in the sand where care becomes routine instead of optional. When that line is crossed, the body begins to respond almost immediately. You keep thinking that health is about fixing problems after they appear. You wait for a crisis, a flare-up, a wake-up call, and then scramble for solutions. That approach guarantees one thing: every small issue becomes harder to reverse. Waiting doesn't save time, it steals it. Here's a truth most people refuse to see: prevention is more powerful than cure. Yet few treat it that way. Most treat their bodies like they're disposable, expecting instant repair when disaster strikes. That's not strength. That's denial dressed up as resilience. Another uncomfortable realization: every choice you make compounds. Skipping circulation support one day doesn't seem like much. Ignoring tension in the spine once feels trivial, but repeated neglect accumulates. Eventually, the body resists, and suddenly you're not looking for small fixes. You're fighting uphill battles that could have been avoided. Old wisdom understood this. Remedies like castor oil and rosemary weren't trendy. They were preventive. They maintained flow, reduced inflammation, supported digestion, and strengthened resilience before breakdowns even appeared. They weren't exciting, but they worked. They respected the body's natural rhythm instead of forcing it. Here's a mindset shift that's hard to accept. Waiting for the perfect moment to care is a trap. The perfect moment doesn't exist. Every day you delay, the body adapts to neglect. Every day you ignore simple, proven actions, the window for effortless recovery shrinks. Another harsh truth: modern thinking glorifies reaction over prevention. You're rewarded for solving problems, not preventing them. That reward system trains you to delay, ignore, and rationalize. But the body doesn't reward rationalizations. It only responds to consistent care. You've been told to rest when you're exhausted, but not to actively support your systems daily. That's why most miracles feel random. They're not miracles. Their bodies finally given the consistent attention they were owed all along. Most people fail not because solutions don't exist, but because they treat them as optional instead of essential. They wait for dramatic results instead of appreciating quiet improvements. And quiet improvements repeated daily are what build lasting health. You don't need a complicated system. You need awareness, consistency, and respect for what actually works. The body is intelligent. It responds when given direction, support, and care. But if you keep waiting, it adapts to neglect instead of thriving. Here's the truth that can't be ignored. Prevention is the only shortcut that lasts. Every day you delay action, you make recovery harder, slower, and more painful. The clock is running, whether you acknowledge it or not.